Welcome to The Explainer. Look, if you've been filling up your gas tank lately or just catching the headlines since the late February escalations, you know the US-Iran conflict is literally at a boiling point. Today, we're taking the incredibly dense, complex 2026 US-Iran peace framework and translating it into a clear, step-by-step survival guide for everyday citizens. We're going to break down those heavy diplomatic proposals into a clear, visual roadmap so you can see exactly how we might step back from the brink.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the cost of conflict. Second, why total victory fails. Third, the 6-step peace plan. Fourth, solving the proxy puzzle. Fifth, enforcing the peace. And finally, why this matters to you.
So, Section 1, the cost of conflict and the immediate pain we're all feeling right now.
Before we even look at solutions, we really have to acknowledge the real-world reality of these February escalations. I mean, this isn't just some abstract geopolitical theory, right? It's a crisis with an immediate, tangible impact on everyday people everywhere. Because of the naval clashes, the blockades, and retaliatory strikes, we saw oil prices spike above $100 a barrel at their peak. This directly hit wallets globally. It caused an instant economic shock and kicked up some massive fears of global inflation and recession. And honestly, that's exactly why every single citizen should care about finding a viable off-ramp here.
And the reason for that crazy price spike? It's because roughly 20% of the world's global oil transits right through the Strait of Hormuz. When that strait faces closure or blockades, it creates an instant bottleneck halfway across the world that ends up costing you way more at your local pump. The pain is totally global, which, well, means the incentive for peace is also global.
Which brings us to Section 2, why total victory fails and the current deadlock. We really need to look at the structural trap of this conflict. See, both the United States and Iran are constrained by pride, domestic politics, and just the sheer mathematical impossibility of a maximalist win without triggering a catastrophic wider war or even a total collapse. Let's look at this neutrally and compare the core needs of both sides. The U.S. absolutely needs verifiable nuclear rollback, open shipping through Hormuz without Iranian leverage, and strict limits on proxies. Meanwhile, Iran needs sanctions relief to breathe economically, regime survival, and sovereign enrichment rights. The reality is, neither side can force the other into total surrender. So a phased, face-saving compromise? It's actually the only logical way out that respects the absolute red lines of both nations.
So how do we get there? Section 3, the 6-step peace plan, our blueprint. To break this massive deadlock, mediators, like Pakistan, working with influence from China, have put together a really realistic manual for de-escalating the crisis. It's often called the one-page peace proposal for citizens. What's really interesting about this is how it takes an overwhelming geopolitical crisis and just breaks it down into realistic, time-bound milestones. It kicks off with an immediate 30-day halt to all shooting and reopening Hormuz. From there, it moves into humanitarian relief, then security guarantees, phase sanctions relief, a final nuclear deal within a year, and finally, continuous enforcement forever after. It's built entirely on incremental, verifiable wins.
Let's zoom in on those first steps. Phases 1 and 2 are literally all about stopping the bleeding. Instead of getting bogged down in diplomatic jargon like humanitarian carve-outs, let's think of it this way. It means releasing some frozen assets so everyday Iranians can simply buy food and medicine. This kind of immediate, tangible economic relief builds absolutely crucial early trust. Iranians get economic relief, Americans see compliance on the basic stuff, and the intense domestic pressure on leaders finally drops.
Then we roll right into the middle phases. This is where both sides lay down written guarantees preventing surprise attacks on each other or on global shipping. And crucially, Iran accepts explicit limits on missiles. To really lock this piece in, major external investment from China, Europe, and the Gulf states is encouraged. Rebuilding damaged infrastructure gives everyone a highly profitable mutual interest in stabilizing the entire region.
Finally, phases 5 and 6 establish a long-term equilibrium. Iran caps its nuclear program at low, peaceful levels, and in exchange, major sanctions end permanently. But here's the kicker. This whole setup is enforced by independent monitors checking sites and sea lanes 24/7. If anyone cheats, there are severe, pre-agreed automatic penalties. Absolutely no debates.
Moving on to Section 4, solving the proxy puzzle and deconstructing Lebanon.
We absolutely have to address the elephant in the room here, the axis of resistance, and specifically Hezbollah and Lebanon. Any peace plan that just ignores these proxy dynamics is pretty much doomed from day one. But demanding unrealistic total surrender is just as unworkable. So the crucial point is understanding this concept of parallel military authority. Hezbollah operates totally outside the regular Lebanese state command. You can't just wish an embedded proxy group like this away. Instead, you have to change the cost structure of their independence. You make it far more expensive to remain an armed autonomous group than it is to just integrate.
And that is exactly where the Lebanon Security Track mechanism comes in. It brilliantly separates political identity from military autonomy. So Hezbollah actually keeps its civilian political role, but its fighters are given a clear exit ramp to integrate directly into the Lebanese Armed Forces, the LAF. Heavy weapons are audited, capped, and physically moved away from the border. All of this is overseen by layered external verification, with automatic consequences for any violations. It rechannels the group's energy, rather than trying to magically erase them overnight.
Okay, Section 5. Enforcing the peace through mutual interdependence.
Now, you might be understandably skeptical right about now, right? Wondering why this deal would survive when past agreements like the 2015 JCPOA eventually completely fell apart. Well, it all comes down to enforcement mechanics. The 2015 JCPOA was vulnerable because it deliberately excluded missiles and proxies, and it completely collapsed when the U.S. unilaterally exited. The new 2026 framework explicitly tackles these exact loopholes. It includes specific missile range caps, the Lebanese proxy track we just talked about, and, super importantly, it brings in multinational guarantors like China and Russia to enforce it.
Think of it like this. It's the hostage to good behavior concept. Global economic interdependence is the ultimate enforcer here. China relies heavily on a stable flow of oil through an open Strait of Hormuz. European and Gulf states desperately want trade and regional stability. When these massive economic anchors are fundamentally tied to the peace plan, cheating simply becomes way too expensive for any single party to even risk.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 6, why this matters to you, the citizen payoff.
We've talked a whole lot about Middle Eastern diplomacy, centrifuges, and structural bottlenecks. But let's bring this all back home and bridge the gap between global diplomacy and your local gas station. What does this actually mean for you? Well, I absolutely love this quote from the one-page peace proposal. This is not about winners and losers. It is about stopping the bleeding and giving both nations a dignified off-ramp. I think that perfectly sums it up. This entire framework is a highly practical compromise designed specifically to secure lower gas prices, prevent terrifying attacks on shipping, provide real safety for everyday Iranians, and essentially ensure global stability. At the end of the day, it's about real people.
Which brings us to our final thought. The stakes of the 2026 conflict literally couldn't be higher. But the framework exists, the steps are clearly laid out, the mechanisms for verification and economic relief are completely ready to go. So the ultimate question remains, will leaders choose the painful compromises of peace or the catastrophic costs of pride? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really encourage you to keep exploring this absolutely vital topic.